Okay, folks, hope you all had a good dinner. I invite you to settle down now for our dinner address, or post-dinner address. And then I don't need to introduce him. You all know my friend and collaborator, Brian Harvey. This year, Brian and his colleague Dan Garcia, who you all also know, got awarded the ACM Karlstrom Award for outstanding education.
Thank you.
And this is among the most prestigious awards in computing education. And Brian specifically got it for his work on Snap, but also for his earlier work on the logo books. And basically, Brian has this life of educating, of, as he says, of being a Promethean, of bringing down the fire from the gods to the humans. And I don't know, we're all basically friends in here. We've been in the room together with Brian over the years many times when I think we all felt goosebumps. And it was when Brian, out of the blue, mentioned things that sort of stuck with us. Like I remember one time, I think when we were at the MIT Sloan School, I think Duke was in the room, when Brian somehow said, computing is your birthright as a human being. And something like that struck with me. And so I think nobody actually is a better programming teacher than Brian. We've got the world's best programming teacher here. And now he's an official thought leader. And this is why I had to ask him out of my dearest heart to please talk to us and share your radical, maybe non-conformist, maybe surprising, but maybe also mundane visions about education and computing and your views about the state of education and computing. Folks, hand it over to Brian. Brian.
Okay, thank you. Now, you're supposed to applaud at the end if you still feel that way. Right, thank you, Jens. That's amazing. So here's the ACM. ACM, for those who don't know, is the Association for Computing Machinery, which I joined as a high school student in 1960-something. And already then, they were embarrassed about the fact that the name made it an association for machines instead of people. And ever since then, they've been trying to find a more human-centered term that ACM would be the acronym for. Anyway, so let me tell you about the Karlstrom Award. Here's the ACM blurb. Dan and Brian, blah, 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 bring the beauty and joy of computing to all students, especially those from historically underrepresented communities. And it goes on to say how we did this through the Beauty and Joy of Computing curriculum. So, yeah. Things you don't see every day, Brian in a dinner jacket. And if you look really carefully, you can see me holding the award upside down. Does that have a meaning? No. Yes, the meaning it has is that I'm very farsighted. Okay. Don't tell anyone. But it's really Dan's award much more than mine. Not only because he's the ACM education activist, which he is. He's a big shot in the special interest group on computer science education. But also because, if you want to know the truth, I actually don't care that much about bringing whatever they said to underrepresented groups. Footnote. I'm not saying that I'm against diversity, equity, or inclusion. I'm not. I am not Donald Trump. But it's not what excites me. What excites me is teaching the best computer science course I can. And I kind of have faith that if I can do that, then, even girls and people of color will find it interesting, because it is interesting. So what is the best computer science course that I know how to teach? And for BJC, this means functional programming, recursion, higher order functions. These are like the secret sauce of computer science. Why did you just do that? I don't understand this thing. Anyway. Before BJC, Matt Wright and I wrote the course that it replaced at Berkeley, called Simply Scheme. We designed it as a prequel to what is the actual best computer science course ever invented, Structure and Interpretation of Computer Programs, by Hal Abelson and Gerald J. Sussman with Julie Sussman. They wrote the book 60, 70 years ago, something like that. And it's still the best computer science course ever invented, in my humble opinion. This goal, teaching functional programming, had an awful lot to do with how BYOB3 and then SNAP looks. Okay, so we have the gray rings around procedures and all of that. That's Lambda. And that was really my contribution to SNAP more than anything else, was anonymous procedures in SNAP. So it's Dan's award much more than mine, but I'm up here rather than Dan, because this is a SNAP conference, not a BJC conference. Okay, Jens wanted me to predict the future for you, talk about, say something radical about what's going to happen in computer science education. I think AI may be profoundly world-changing for adults who need jobs to stay alive. That's a thing that could happen. But I'm not sure how much it's going to change the lives of children, because schooling is remarkably tough, persistent. So mostly people who talk about AI in education see it as a threat. Kids will use it to cheat, or maybe AI will replace teachers and we won't have jobs anymore. Or sort of the best of these views is we don't know yet what skills kids are really going to need in an AI-dominated world, supposing that we have one. I'm pretty confident that AI won't replace teachers for rich kids. And computers already replace teachers for poor kids long before AI. The poor kids sit in front of computers that give them arithmetic problems. So it's not as if we're opening up a can of worms that's brand new. Why do we still make kids learn arithmetic? People I respect, such as Paul Goldenberg, argue that mathematical understanding has to start with the concrete before the abstract becomes understandable. That if you just, give 8-year-olds an algebra course, they won't get it. They have to be comfortable with, doing arithmetic first. That's an argument. I mean, maybe that's right. Paul's career has largely, at least in recent years, been about making arithmetic not be the huge turnoff that it is for most kids. Still, to me, this feels a bit like those ancient Greeks who argued that kids had to learn to memorize poetry even though they had smartphones. Time was, when I got started in this business, everyone said that kids had to learn to use a word processor instead of programming, lest they be unemployable. Anybody my age remember those days? And there were big arguments about which word processor we should teach the kids, because if you learn one, you can't use another one. What happened wasn't exactly that they were proven wrong, but rather that kids now grow up in a world in which word processing is no big deal. They just learn to do it. You know, if you can play those complicated video games that kids play that I can't, you can use a word processor. Similarly, I think that if it turns out kids have to know something about how to use AI software, then a generation from now they will know. It won't be a big deal. This is one of these transitional issues rather than a big thing. So no, I don't think AI is going to change much in education. I could be wrong. So I want to talk about curriculum, which is sort of the big bugaboo of my life. Dan and I got the Karlstrom Award for the beauty and joy of computing, which isn't just any curriculum. It's one that's attached to a College Board advanced placement exam, AP Computer Science Principles, which means that every 5 years, when they change the rules for what has to be in AP CS Principles, we have to give them a spreadsheet in which we show them exactly where in BJC each of the 200-odd bullet points is covered. Pain in the butt. But in fact, writing curriculum is what I've mostly done with my life. It's certainly the things that I'm known for. Computer science logo style, Simply Scheme, BJC, even the so-called SNAP reference manual is full of tutorial curriculum about some of the more abstract features. Starting with first-class lists. What does it mean for lists to be first class? And then first-class functions, object-oriented programming and inheritance, first-class continuations. Kind of pleased that we actually have that. And metaprogramming recently. Many of the teachers who use BJC press us to add more assessment. That's what they want in a curriculum. They want problems they can give kids and grade them on so that they can assign a grade at the end of the course. And for that matter, so that they can make their principals happy week by week. They have to keep on assessing kids. And because of that, they get very upset if kids find solutions to the exercises online, which was a big problem when we invented smart script picks in Snap, because the script picks in the curriculum were largely made from the secret solutions projects rather than from the stripped down starter projects. And so every one of those pictures has the complete solution in it. Horror. or else my mic falls off. So the fact of curriculum pushes people toward making it like school and not like progressive education. So for example, here's the thing called a self-check question. This is from BJC. This is actually one of the better ones because you're not just supposed to memorize the answer, you're supposed to figure it out as you read the code. But the context of this question is a lab about generating English sentences. We used to say things like generating natural language sentences so as not to be English-centric. But I've had a lot of lectures from Jens about how this sentence generation exercise doesn't work in German, so I guess I'm back to saying English. But sentence generation isn't what this question is about. This question is about how to write a program using random numbers to pick different alternatives with different probabilities. Which is fine. I mean, you know, that's a technique, but it's not the point of the lab. And having questions like this in the lab distracts from the point of the lab. In the beginning, we had very, very rare self-check questions. Every so often, something would come up where we thought kids were being asked to learn something complicated, and we wanted an opportunity for them to stop and see whether they learned it or not. But nowadays, every single page in the curriculum is full of self-check questions. And furthermore, the name self-check question has become a lie because it's not for checking yourself, it's for your teacher to give you a grade. Right? So it should really be called jump through hoops questions. So this bothers me. It always bothers me when curricula lie to the students. And this is an example of that. So I'm not 100% pleased that I'm being, what's the word I want? Recognized in retrospect for having written a lot of curriculum. That's not what I think is the best thing I ever did. What they should have given me an award for is the Computer Center Users Society. So down in the front, kneeling down, that's me on the right, and Paul Goldenberg on the left, your left. But more importantly, we have, I don't know, can you see my, yes you can, look at that. We have my friend Deepy, and my friend Dan, and my friend Dominic, and my friend Will, and my friend Jonathan, and my friend Prabhu, and my friend Robert, and my friend Michael, and my friend Kenny, and my friend Jay, who I think Bernat looks exactly like, but never mind. And I'm not going to go through the back row, but I could, and I didn't have to look them up, because, 20 years later, 30 years later, however long it's been, these are my friends. So the Lincoln Sudbury Regional High School in Sudbury, Massachusetts, if you go in the middle of the night, not during rush hour, it's about a half-hour drive from MIT. When I decided to stop reading about teaching and actually do it, it took a while for me to find a school where I thought I'd be able to be me and not be a stereotyped teacher. But eventually, through mutual friends, namely Paul and Cindy, I did find this school. And amazingly, they wanted a computer teacher rather than a math teacher, which I thought I would have to be. I thought I was giving up computers when I entered teaching. So I got there in January 1979 to set up a computer department. They had a computer back then, and it was sort of run by the math department. But the school, including the math teachers who ran this facility, had the idea that calling it part of the math department turned off kids who hated math, which is, to a first approximation, kids. And so if they thought that if we had a separate computer department that kids would find it appealing. And that worked pretty much. I mean, we did get a lot of kids who would not have been so interested in something presented to them as mathematics. But the important thing that happened is that I talked the school into letting me not give grades. I would never get away with that today. But you have to remember, in 1979, computers hadn't taken over the world yet. And so the school thought of computing as a fun elective, like drama or art, rather than as a serious core subject. So that's why they let me get away with it. So everything was great now, except for two problems. The first problem was litter in the computer center. About the same time as this was all happening, businesses started advertising the paperless office. They were wrong. Computers have not done away with paper. They generate paper much faster than human beings ever could. So litter, that was one problem, to the point where the janitors refused to walk into the computer center, which was a crisis. And the second problem was I would get to school at 7 in the morning. Classes started at 8. And when I got there, there'd be a dozen kids lined up in front of the computer center waiting for me to let them in. And when school was over in the afternoon, they wouldn't let me go home because, they wanted to keep hacking on the computer. So my colleague Larry Davidson had the brilliant idea to use these two problems to solve each other. And we established the Computer Center Users Society, which would be in charge of running the room, Summerhill style, so, general meetings to make policy. But specifically including the responsibility for keeping the room clean. Parenthesis. I was hoping they would do it by teaching themselves to throw their garbage in the garbage, but no, they set up a rotating schedule with a different kid each day in charge of cleaning up at the end of the day. Why would anybody be part of the society? Because members were given keys to the computer center. Another thing I'd never get away with today. Giving kids keys to any room would be problematic enough, but a room full of expensive computer equipment, and I want to give kids keys? Yes. One more thing that I never get away with was taking kids out to dinner. So even though kids had keys to the room and I was therefore, oh, shut up. Sorry. Even though I was allowed to go home, I still didn't because this was where my friends were in the computer center. And every so often I would say, hey, let's go out for Chinese food. And there were enough seniors, that is, kids who were old enough to have driver's licenses, that we had enough cars that everybody could pile in, and we would drive to Cambridge, where the good Chinese restaurants were. Another thing I'd never get away with is taking kids home for the weekend. No, they did not sleep in my bed. I am not Michael Jackson. They slept in the fold-out couch in my living room. But, you know, I taught them to eat Eggs Benedict and stuff like that. It was great. And remember, the school was in Massachusetts. So in the summer, Massachusetts not only has muggy humidity, but also has flying insects. So I would go to California for the summer. And in 2 different summers, I took a few kids out to California with me. And boy, this is definitely something I'd never get away with today. Today, it's just assumed that if you're an unmarried male teacher and you want to see kids socially, it's to abuse them. Indeed, after I got this award, the ACM magazine has a feature called People of ACM, and they interview, you know, important people. And they interviewed me. They do the interview by email. So they sent out a bunch of questions, and I sent back answers. And in what I sent them, I told you the story of the Lincoln Sudbury Computer Center User Society, just as I've told it to you here. But they edited out the stuff on this page. They didn't want to talk about me taking kids out to dinner, let alone out to California. So I hate the 21st century. Thank you.
To end with, I hate the 21st century. Does anybody feel like asking any question after this anymore?
Thank you. I was I'm a mathematics teacher officially since 1988, and I used that grade in 2017, so 30 years later, to become a teacher of computer science. And when I arrived at the school, my reference to high school was my own high school, which was in the 70s. I was lucky enough to be in the Dutch equivalent of the Massachusetts Sudbury. Anyhow, I had teachers like you, who I slept at their house, I ate with them, I went on holiday with them, and so I had difficulty teaching in the first year, 2017, 2018, and I needed some inspiration, and I went to Barcelona for the STEAM conference in Barcelona. I don't know, yes, that's the name. And I suggested that I take some kids with me because I had difficulty teaching the kids because they were expecting me to teach C++. They've learned, you know, that's where our games are written in. And I said, no, you don't want C++. You want Snap or similar. And but indeed, the 21st century forbid it. So thank you for celebrating the 20th century.
Right. Thank you. That's great to hear. I almost forgot to say, they told me to give a 15-minute talk, and I wrote the talk, and it was 44 minutes long. I couldn't really say it in 15 minutes. So what I did is I recorded the 44-minute version. It actually only took me half an hour when I recorded it. And it is in the conference website. No, it will be in the conference website under the page for this talk. So if you're interested, you can hear the long version. Anything else?
Dan, you're on.
Great. I wasn't sure. Nobody yielded to me. Thank you. I wanted to, Brian, thank you for 35 years of friendship and mentoring. I've been at Berkeley for 35 years, and almost from day one, I got to meet Brian, and he was my mentor for the entire time there. So thank you for all of that and all that I've learned from you. I will say that if you were in high school today, I think you would find that you can have after-school clubs, and that is exactly as you described. There's no grades, the kids can own the space, they're leaders, and just like we have at Berkeley this idea of decals where students teach each other, and students lead their courses, and we just facilitate that. That's the whole space of these decals is really what has persisted. So I think there's a lot of that spirit from Lincoln Sudbury. So I think that if you were to teach today, it isn't as bad. It isn't as bad as you think. I think you'd be enjoying.
Maybe. Although, if there are computers in the school, they're not there only for the after-school club. Right? They're there for the during the day jumping through hoops also.
Right. That's true.
So.
Anyway, thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Now, for people who are slow catching on about this, Dan Garcia is the other half, the better half of the Karlstrom Award. Yeah.
Okay, I've got one more question, Brian. When you showed that picture of Sudbury High of the computer lab users,
Computer Center Users
Society,
Yeah.
you very carefully and conscientiously mentioned every name with the title, my friend, Jonathan, my friend. Yeah. And that struck me as something that there might be a deeper message from you behind that.
Yeah. Everything conspires to make teachers the enemies of kids. Not because any teacher wants that, but because institutions have a lot of weight. And when you're giving somebody grades, you can't be their friend. It just doesn't work like that. You're not their friend. You're a hurdle they have to overcome. So yeah, it was really important to me that they let me not give grades, and I think that made the whole thing possible. I couldn't have done it otherwise.
But following up on this, so I understand that grades might be in the way of having an honest relationship. But what I'm hearing from you is that maybe the role of an educator, of a teacher, is more than the transferal of skills or competencies, as we like to say.
Yes. I am going to talk about underrepresented minorities after all. There's a lot of research that says that if a black kid over the course of 12 years of schooling has one black teacher, that vastly improves the kid's chance of making it through life successfully. And that's not because the black teacher teaches them black stuff, it's because they feel a connection. And yeah, if you listen to the long version, I talk about my 7th grade algebra teacher, who was the best teacher I had and who didn't actually teach me anything. But anyway, there's a story about that. But yeah, not every teacher has to be me, but every kid has to have a me teacher, I think. I think that's crucial.
Well, thank you very much. And I just recognized that this is actually something that Dan and you sort of have in common, this desire to overcome and deal with grades and sort of still make it work for kids. And thank you very much. I'm taking away that teachers also have maybe the purpose of building a relationship, and that it's a sort of a
Yeah.
holistic approach. That it's not necessarily about the content, but about the ways to lead lives
That's
together.
right. If you're interested in philosophy of education, Martin Buber writes about this a lot.
Thank you so much.
Question
Any
in the back.
more question?
So, is this work? Yeah. Brian, you're such a liar. I love the way you've presented tonight. I recognize you as an educator as well as a computer scientist. And I want to thank you for that.
Thank you for that.
My best answer to the difficulty that you showed us in front of us about EDI is that you would care to show unconditional positive regard for your students, irrespective of any kind of relationship issues. And this is something that Hargreaves talks about, and I've been totally sold on for years. And he also Hargreaves also recognizes the problem around assessment that Jens has just talked about. And that problem never goes away. It's a problem you just have to tackle and not assume there's some magic solution to it. And
So-
you do it through this unconditional positive.
In fairness, I have to say, there were kids I didn't like.
Yeah, sure.
There weren't a lot, but there were some. No, but you're not allowed to not like a kid when you're a teacher. Because you have to be fair in your grading of that kid. There weren't many kids I didn't like, but there were a few, and I was not a good teacher for those kids. So, not perfect.
There's a second point, if you forgive me, Edgar. And it's very quick. It's just to say, you are the embodiment for me of somebody who has shaped computer science itself through your educative purpose. And we should be encouraged as educators, if we are those, and I think we mostly are, that we can be helping to shape computer science, not simply to accept it from some professionals that think they know what they're doing, but because we have an ideal about knowledge and the way knowledge is expressed within computing in a more effective and more exciting and enjoyable way.
Thank you very much. Is that it?